Okay, I hope everyone had a nice lunch with our regional and seasonal food that we're serving. Trying to be as consistent as possible, as environmental. This session, this next masterclass this afternoon is Economy for the Common Good, the proposal for systemic change. And we're happy to have with us to lead the discussion Christian Felber from Austria. He's a writer. He's written 15 books. So young, and he's written 15 books. And the last one, Change Everything, Creating an Economy for the Common Good. Is that the latest, or your sort of the...
So far, the only one in English.
Ah, the only one in English. Okay. And he teaches at the University of Vienna in Austria, and he's a dancer. Yes. What kind of?
Contemporary dancer.
Contemporary dancer.
My passion is contact improvisation. And yeah.
Okay.
And if it's too boring, what I will tell you.
And boring it's not, but it may take us a little bit off the beaten track.
Yeah, only if you join me.
Okay. He's co-founder of ATTAC, which is an organization in the German-speaking countries, which we talked
French,
which we talked about this morning at the discussion on pushback against civil society. That ATTAC is under attack by the powers that be, and I'm interested in finding out exactly what you mean, an economy for the common good, because I had never heard of this formulation before. So, Christian, you'll lead us into discussion. Then you said you have an interactive game that you're going to play with that, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So,
great.
And again, as this morning, any comments, questions, you need to wait for the mic because we're recording the session. Okay, Christian?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being invited to this wonderful gathering. If you have not heard about the Economy for the Common Good so far, it's no surprise because it's a very young initiative and social movement. We started only 5 years ago in Austria and Vienna, and since then the idea, but also the movement, is spreading to more and more countries. And if you really want to dance, maybe we can do it in the end. My contribution to our 5th anniversary celebration was a dance piece of 10 minutes. And you can, of course, find it on our website if you're interested, because it's true that it's a very essential part of my life to not only work with the brain, but also with the body and the soul and the senses and everything else, and the heart. Yeah, and maybe the first thing I want to say is a comment to Uli Eichelmann, who was in the previous session in this room, and he said that the biggest environmental protection organizations in the world deem themselves as very successful, which maybe looking on their campaigns, it is true, but the system as a whole is worsening the state of the planet and also maybe of many societies. And I think this is also true. And my good message is that I was invited last week by Greenpeace in Germany, and they said the same thing about themselves. And that's why they invited me. And they now start to talk about the system as a whole, and they are reflecting on entering the debate about the future of the system. So maybe what Uli has contributed is already spreading in many minds, and in mine it's already, and it's already in the people's minds. This is not a survey from Greenpeace or from the World Wildlife Fund. This is a survey from Accenture, one of the big aggressive corporations, among 40,000 consumers in the world, and they're asking for a different system, not for reforms or for singular alternatives. They are asking for a change of the model. And another survey, which is even more surprising because it has been made in the assumingly most affluent countries at present, Germany and Austria, and it has been done by the Bertelsmann Foundation, which is not exactly a collaborator of ATTAC in Germany. and they asked if people desire a new economic order, and the result is very astonishing. In Germany it was 88%, and in lucky, tiny Austria, 90%. Why? Because people, although they are materially well off, they recognize that the crisis is a holistic crisis, and the immaterial dimensions of the crisis are as many as the material dimensions of the crisis. Talking about meaning at work and in life, talking about values, talking about democracy, talking about feelings, why not? And of course, talking about the ecology and our environment. And the lesson learned out of this is, if this is a holistic, systemic crisis, we need a holistic answer. And maybe not a single answer, but many answers. And these are our friends, other initiatives on the issue of system change within the economy. And they're also, at the same time, an answer to Margaret Thatcher. She became famous for 2 sentences. One is the verse. She said, "There is no such thing as a society," in brackets, and the planet. There are men, there are women, there are individuals, but there is no such thing as a society. I think this is the most dangerous quotes of Maggie Thatcher. But the other one, which is equally famous, is there is an alternative. In a democracy, there is always an alternative, and I would even say there are many alternatives, always in a true democracy. And that's why the answer of social movements all over the world, which I am part of, is tapas. There are plenty of alternatives. And they are altogether as delicious as the real Spanish tapas. And you do not find the economy for the common good on this list, because maybe it's one of the youngest alternatives. As already mentioned, 5 years ago, nothing of what I will tell you now did exist. And we are asking ourselves why it is spreading so rapidly, so far, to 50 countries in the world. We have seen first operative actions in these countries, maybe because it's not only a theoretical model, which is consistent and complete. It's a full alternative to both capitalistic economy and also a communist economy. It is as well a very alive movement with thousands of persons, companies, municipalities, universities, and other organizations and institutions. And third, we have learned another lesson from the last 25 years of political activism, that it's not enough to have a beautiful alternative that is even supported by a large majority of the citizens if governments and parliaments don't like it. So we have also, at the same time, developed a process of implementation, which is a deepening of our present democracies. But let me start with the model. I am not an economist, by the way. I teach at Vienna University for economics and business administration, but I'm not an economist, not because I don't like the economy, I'm not interested, but because the perspective of the classical economic science is too narrow to me. I wanted to study universal sciences at universities, which was not possible. And this is curious enough, because I ask, but why do you call yourselves universities if you do not offer universal sciences? Oh, that comes from Universitas, they answered. And Universitas is the union of teachers and researchers and students. And I said, I know that, but that's not the etymological original root of the word. Do you know what's the original root of the word university is? Now you're asking me too quickly. It comes from the universe. And universe is a composed word in Latin and comes from unum and versum and means one single verse, a poem, a song, or at least one single whole, a togetherness. Everything is connected with everything. That's the literal meaning of university. And today, institutions that carry this promise in their name don't offer access to the whole, but only to fragments cleanly separated one from each other. So we honestly would have to rename them in multiversities, polyversities, literally in perversities, because I'm a linguist, by the way, so this is very serious. Perverter, it's etymology. Etymos, the truth in Old Greek, logos of the concept, and pervertere only means put things upside down, nothing else. And if an institution that promises to access, to offer the access to the whole, only offers the access to fragments of the whole, then it's putting upside down its name, its title. And my perfect university would look like a bit like this Schumacher College in Totnes. As far as I know, it's the only university of holistic science in the world. And everybody who is studying there would study the same in the first section of the studies. And then the students can specialize. This would have two advantages. First, they have a common ground as for a lifetime. Second, the danger that some, for instance, the technicians do something without taking into regard nature is less, or the risk that business is separating from ethics is also less. And maybe that's exactly what has happened. The economic science has separated from its several contexts, and that's why I was not intrigued by this science and did not study it. And the economy for the common good is proposing to marry or to remarry economics and the economy with all its contexts, with values, ethics, with feelings, humanity, with democracy, and with the ecological ground of everything, which is the ecosystems of our planet. And asking how the economy could forget all this and separate from its contexts, there are two explanations. And the first one is that they don't know where the economic science is coming from. The world's famous economist of all times, Adam Smith, was not an economist by his formation. He could not be one because there was no such thing as an economic science in the mid of the 18th century. He was a philosopher, a moral philosopher. And before writing his very famous book, The Welfare of Nations, he wrote the theory of moral sentiments. He wrote about feelings and values. And today, if you talk with still some economists about feelings or values, they will look at you very rarely, or they will say, oh, sorry, the economy is not about values. This is objective science. So, end of the discussion. Not knowing that the economic science comes out of the philosophy, which comprises this all. And philosophy means the love for wisdom, by the way. So it's about being wise, and I don't think that hedge funds are wise, or high frequency is wise, or vulture funds are wise, or banks that are too big to fail are wise. And staring at GDP growth as the highest goal of the economy is not wise either. But maybe the least wise thing, or the unwisest thing, what economists have achieved is that they're mixing up goals and means in the economy. What do I mean by that? I'm asking students in business schools and at universities where they study economics, what is the goal of the economy? Because first of all, we want to talk about the purpose. And the answer is to make money, profit, profit, money, money, profit, profit, money. And I ask them, but who tells you this, please? Well, that's what we are taught, Mr. Felber. Okay, and how do they argue that it should be this way? Those who tell you this? No idea. We know what the goal is. It's to make money. It's about making profit. It's about making GDP grow. But why? They don't have an idea. They don't have a clue. And in my worldview, it's okay to ask from time to time your intuition, or to always also listen to your intuition, and asking which might be the purpose of the economy, if it's not an end in itself, if it's an instrument at the service of human societies, following and enhancing their values, respecting the democratic rules, and being aware of the ecological limits of the planet. The logical goal of the economy is the common good. And when I was younger, I tended to deem myself as a madman when I had such crazy ideas. Now I'm a bit more relaxed, and I take a look into different sources. For instance, constitutions of democratic countries. And they say exactly the same. So maybe not I'm wrong, but the economy is wrong or misguided. And maybe the constitution of Bavaria is an exception from the rule. But the even better news is that this is the rule without any exception. Not all constitutions tell us something about the overarching goal of the economy, but all constitutions that do tell us about the goal of the economy tell us the same, that it's the common good. Maybe I have many more examples, but just to show you three, the common good is the higher goal of all economic activities. This does not mean that money is a bad thing, or capital, or investments, or loans. That's a misunderstanding. It just means that money is not the goal of the economy, it's a means. It's an important, very important, it's an absolutely decisive clarification. And the next good news is that this clarification has already been made by very prominent thinkers, even thousands of years ago. Just it's not known by many economists because they are not taught about Aristotle's thoughts, because Aristotle was not an economist. He could not be, of course, if Adam Smith wasn't one. But Aristotle made very sharp thoughts on the economy, and he distinguished two concepts of the economy, oikonomia and krematistike. And in the first one, he regarded money only as a means to achieve the goal of the economy, which he defined as the good life, also a just society. He coined both terms. But if the means turned into the goal, and if making money was or became the purpose of doing business and also arts, then he already considered that as anti-natural and called it krematistike. Put a different concept. And krematistike is a perfect synonym for capitalism. Capitalism, be aware of all isms. And capitalism is a way to run the economy where the increase of capital is the goal. And everything else is or an instrument or a side effect, which might happen, but does not happen necessarily. And oikonomia is a perfect synonym for economy for the common good. Common good is the goal, and money is just a means to achieve it. Maybe that's so decisive, and I will show you in a minute why, that I give you another picture that you can remember that when you go home. This is the picture. You see, it works somehow, but it's a bit strange. And maybe in the long run, it's better to bring the economy back on its feet. This is, yeah, thanks. This might sound a bit playful to you now, but now I'm becoming very serious. And I want to prove why that is so important. It becomes so important when we look at the moment to measure success in the economy. How do we measure success? How do we use to measure success in the economy today? Usually, at the level of a national economy, with which indicator, GDP, at the end of a company, with which parameter, profit, spiritual profit, or financial profit, thank you. And at the level of a single investment, how do we return? Which return? Yeah, eternal return. Eternal financial return on investment. Exactly. Just to check if we, and that's a cool example of mainstreaming. No matter where we come from, we have the same notion how we use to measure success in economy. What do they have in common? Yes, exactly. The unit of measurement is money in all three of them. And now two very mean questions. First mean question, is money the goal of the economy? Yeah. Maybe in the... Ideally or realistically? Exactly. That's, well, ideally, according to constitutions, clearly not. If we look at economic practice and some business schools, yes. So there is a confusion, there is a contradiction. But before we resolve the confusion and the conflict, the even meaner question, is it more exact, intelligent, and wise to measure success alongside the means of your activity, project, enterprise? No, or or alongside the goal and its achievement? Crystal clear, isn't it? So the confusion is that either economic practice is wrong or constitutions are wrong. This is the other possibility. Because if we asked the sovereign citizens, which is our proposal, shall the accumulation of money be the overarching goal of all economic activities, then they might say yes. Yes, sure, because everything else is a consequence of this. It's the economy, stupid. Huh? That might be the opinion of the citizens in your country. And the good message is that this question has been posed in Germany by the government. And the result, and the result was this one. Less than 20% of citizens answered, yes, we agree that the GDP shall be the highest, the increase of GDP shall be the highest goal of economic policy and social policy, whereas 2/3 of the population, which would constitute a constitutional majority, said, no, we would like to replace the GDP by a kind of gross national happiness indicator or a more comprehensive welfare indicator and subordinate all other policy goals in economic and social policy. It's a representative survey made by the government in Germany. So we don't have to speculate. We have already one clear result. If we ask citizens, very probably they would agree with constitutions, with the ideal state of the art, and not with the practical state of the art. And they would say, no, common good is the goal, and money is just the means. And then, if we want to measure success in the economy correctly, we would have to adjust success measurement alongside the goal, which is not only in constitutions, but democratically confirmed. Next good message, there already exist common good products. Already mentioned the G&H, Gross National Happiness, or the Better Life Index from the OECD, and there are some others. Maybe the most charming one is that from tiny Bhutan, because they ask 6,000 households every 2 years on all aspects of life quality, of a good life. How are you in comparison to last year? Will your children be once better off than you? Do you trust your neighbors or the first person that you meet in the street? How are the animals, the trees in the wood, fish in the river? Can you take a swim in the river without a health risk? Can you drink the water in the river without a health risk? How about war or peace, democracy, security, stability, and everything that is essential for a good life, including employment, including meaningful employment, including an employment which brings you a good livelihood. Everything you can include into the common good product. And our proposal is not to make copy and paste with the G&H, but that the sovereign citizens gather in their communities. You can gather in your community and ask the people which are the 20 most relevant ingredients of life quality and a good life. And that is the local common good index. And thanks to a process of synthesis, you can figure out the national common good product and even agree internationally on a common good product that replaces the GDP in the function of the measurement of the success of a national economy. The GDP may continue to exist for statistical reasons, but not for the measurement of the success of a national economy. If the common good product rises, we can be fully sure that either unemployment has dropped down, poverty is going back, we have more stable and sound ecosystems, more democracy, less wars, or less forced migration, for instance. We are absolutely sure about that. If the GDP rises, we cannot be sure about any of these relationships and connections. It may exist, and they also may exist negatively in every single of them. So it's not very rational to try to measure a national economy's success with the GDP. Another absolutely reliable relationship is in the economy for the common good between the success of a single company and the success of the society as a whole. Do we have this relationship for sure today? Is it possible that this relationship exists today? No problem. There are many companies that are successful in financial terms and at the same time create meaningful employment, more employment, contribute to the closing gap of inequality. They treat equally women and men, integrate weak groups and the like, strengthen democracy and so on and so forth. But the exact opposite is also possible. It's possible that a company increases threefolds, fourfolds its financial profit and at the same time cuts off thousands of jobs, increases the working pressure, burnout and mobbing rates, discriminates against whoever, undermines democracy and destroys the environment. That's absolutely possible, that a company is individually successful but makes a society not only less successful but poorer, expropriating common goods. In the economy for the common good, we establish an absolutely reliable relationship between the success of a company and the whole society. In other terms, a company can only be successful if it makes society richer at the same time. And maybe in slightly different words, you recognize the dream of Adam Smith. He was exactly dreaming of this. And that was his problem. It was only a dream. And a dream is scientifically spoken very weak, because I'm full of hopes. But if I don't do anything that my hopes come true, then it's a very weak position. But there was one mechanism in which Adam Smith was trusting, and was the invisible hand, at least something. Today, we know that the invisible hand is not only invisible, but that it just doesn't exist. And the economy for the common good proposes to create a visible hand. And that's the common good balance sheet. Common good balance sheet makes Adam Smith's dream come true, as it is asking all companies, what do you contribute to the fundamental values of your democratic society? What do you contribute to the common good? And only if this contribution is not negative, at least, the company gets the license to keep running. And the better the common good balance sheet result is, the better it will be treated by the society as a thank you. And if you start to read with the horizontal orange line, you see very familiar values. Again, we did not invent them, we found them in constitutions of democratic countries. Dignity, solidarity, sustainability, justice, and democracy are the most frequent constitutional values of democratic countries. And the only add-on of our movement is to propose to take them seriously and to ask all companies, that's all, and to ask all companies, what do you do in the field of this value towards all your stakeholders, from the suppliers onto future generations, and to make the result visible and distinguishable. Very pragmatically, on all products and services, all the ethical information. Yeah? It's not the 20th label. No, no. All labels and all ethical informations would be integrated into one single ethical balance sheet information. And in the first step, consumers have finally the full ethical information. Does the average product today tell us who produced it, where and under which working conditions, with which ecological impact or impact on climate change, if the company is a solidary one or a cannibalistic one, if it pays a fair tax share or hides profits in tax havens, if it finances political parties or lobbyists for their own good, or even pays scientists that will prove in a study that the harmful ingredients of these products are not harmful. Do we get usually this information from the products we consider to buy in free markets? Textbooks about the free market economy tell us that all information is available for everybody in the market easily, and this is the precondition for efficiency of markets. If the information is not available, markets can by definition not be efficient. So in the first step, economy for the common good would make markets more efficient. Sounds maybe a bit odd for you, but try to stay calm and relaxed, because the second step is the more important step. The second step is to correct this misrelation of prices between the ethical products and the less ethical products. Today, the ethical products generally, as they cause more costs to the companies, have a higher price. And the less ethical products that violate constitutional values and expropriate common goods or externalize costs, as we also used to say, they are cheaper and have a very clear competitive advantage in the so-called free market economy. And we consider this as a very unintelligent design of the markets. Fortunately, we can design markets. Maybe we cannot design the evolution, but we can design markets. And a more intelligent design would put this in, relationship again upside down. Because if ethical products are less expensive, or the less ethical, the dumping products are more expensive than the ethical ones, who would buy them? And how can we achieve that? Well, linking the common good balance sheet result with incentives that we already know. Taxes, tariffs, loan conditions with banks, priority in public procurement, and so on and so forth. If a company has 1,000 common good points, maybe it doesn't pay any corporate tax anymore, and 0 points, the common good balance sheet, maybe it pays 2 or 3 times the average corporate tax rate. In the international trade, very important, the fairest company enjoys free trade as a counter service, as a thank you. But the less fair, destroying the environment, corrupting democracy, and so on, and exploiting human labor force, well, the higher will be the tariffs in international trade. And then we have an ethical trade instead of a free trade. The public procurer asks, first show me your ethical balance sheet, and then we take a look at the price. And those with a red or an orange one, they can apply, but they will not get it. And the banks, the same. First, they ask for the ethical information, and then they do the financial credit worthiness assessment. This is the last point of this part. I'm a bit upset with economic science, because I do not know in the mainstream of economic science a consciousness about this problem. Economists and bankers regard an investment, and we asked it before, as successful if it provides a financial return on investment. And if the financial return on investment is a double-digit ROI, they get an orgasm. But do they ask, does a double-digit financial return on investment tell us something reliable on the ecological impact of that investment? on the impact on social relationships and communities, on democracy, on trust, security, stability, and on all essential common goods. Is it possible that an investment that generates a double-digit return on investment in financial terms worsens the environment and destroys relationships and communities and corrupts democracy and accelerates the climate change? Is it possible? Yes, it is. Because no bank in the world is obliged to ask for the ethical impacts and consequences of that loan and investment. But banks are obliged by the Basel rules to ask for the financial risks. They are obliged to ask for and assess the financial risk, and there is no duty at all to assess the ethical risk. And the Bank for the Common Good makes first the ethical risk assessment, and only if the common goods are not expropriated, only if the investment does not lead to more inequality, to the violation of human rights, or to the acceleration of the climate change, only then it also does the financial risk assessment. And if the project proposed passes both assessments, then the loan is given, and it's given the cheaper, the higher the added value on our common goods, on the non-financial indicators is. And altogether, this is Spanish, maybe. Altogether, the result will be that the rules of the game of the economy, which today are for profit orientation and competition. I also said that I'm a linguist, and competition actually literally in Latin means cooperation. It's a bit odd because it comes from cum and petere and means literally to search together. If companies work against each other, then in correct Latin this would mean contra petere, and in contemporary English we would say counterpetition. So the present rules of the game of for profit orientation and counterpetition, we propose to change to contribution to the common good, measured in the common good balance sheet, and cooperation in the meaning of being enhanced towards counterpetition. Competition is fine. And the result will be that the rules of the game of the economy would steer and guide economic activity in a different ethical direction. Today, these rules guide us towards human vices and deficiencies, in which meaning, if you live, or I put it very clearly, it is more probable and easier to be successful in the global economy if you live human deficiencies due to these rules of the game. And due to these other rules of the game, it will be easier to be successful in the economy if you live human virtues or timeless and constitutional values. And the rules of the game would be finally in coherence with our fundamental values that are already in the constitutions. This is the core. I stopped the presentation of the model here because we altogether have only 90 minutes. I just mention that the model has 20 cornerstones, and although most of them are described quite precisely, they are not our demands and reivindications because we have a different approach to democratic decision making, and the only demand we have is that the 20 cornerstones of the economic model or order of tomorrow shall be decided democratically. That's the only demand. And there might be as many proposals as there are, with a lot of support in each population, and then they shall be debated and decided democratically. We will be there in 1 minute. I make just a last remark on the content. We propose, for instance, to reduce the average working hours significantly. We propose a free year every 10 years to reduce pressure on labor markets and to allow us to give priority to other dimensions in life, like, for instance, dancing or others. We propose ecological human rights, which is kind of an answer to, or different answer to what was already debated in previous sessions, that would mean that what the planet is giving to humanity is divided sustainably, is divided, it's very, very, very much aligned with your proposal, is divided per capita to all human beings. Means if everybody is using this ecological consumption right fully, the planet is not damaged. And we also have ideas how you could implement this technically. If you're interested, I tell you a bit later. And I'm also working with the ecological donut from Cape Raworth, if you had heard about this. But all of these proposals are very unlikely to be implemented by parliaments and governments. That's what we have learned. And that's why we propose a deep reform of our present democracies where they exist. Maybe some or many even of you are from countries where, well, the level of working of democracy is very, very low. I come from a country where there is a certain level of functional democracy, but I'm at the moment collecting 100 examples where we know very clearly, seriously and reliably that in fundamental questions, people would decide completely different than their governments and parliaments did. No? Just very few examples. People would never decide that there shall be banks that are too big to fail, that they shall be rescued with taxpayers' money instead of with their owners' money, that after the rescue with taxpayers' money, they still may continue to exist. They are still allowed to have their branches in tax havens. There is free movement of capital to tax havens, that there is no limit to inequality, that there are patents on living organisms, and so on and so forth. There are lots of fundamental decisions taken by our parliaments and governments that people would, if they could, decide differently. And that's our proposal. The fundamental question shall be decided directly by the sovereign citizens. And the last time today, I'm giving you an example of how delicious etymology is. I studied political science, amongst others. And years after finishing my studies, I tried to remember if we ever talked about the democracy of tomorrow, the ideal state of the art. We didn't in Vienna. Then I tried to remember which is the core, the heart principle of democracy. And I remembered sovereignty. And then I tried to remember what does it mean originally, etymologically. I had no idea. I looked it up in a dictionary. Does anybody know where the word sovereign or sovereignty comes from? Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much. Exactly. Comes from superanus in Latin and means to be above all. And who is above all in a democracy? According to constitutions, it's the people. So now I'm a dancer, and I always try to think also as well with the body. Now try to be a dancer, try to be dancers and think with your body. What would it mean literally if the people were above all? Your head would be on the ground. Sorry? Your head would be that's a kind of combination of the present star and the ideal star state of the exactly. But imminently it would mean that everything else is below. Exactly. Constitution, parliament, government, every single law, and can be changed in any moment by the highest instance. Otherwise it wouldn't be the highest instance. And that's exactly the proposal of a sovereign democracy, to first and foremost get sovereign rights. In a monarchy, they were a matter of course. The king and the queen had sovereign rights, very powerful ones, and many of them. In the democracy, we forgot to give us, besides the individual, fundamental and human rights, which are a great achievement, and I'm totally happy to have them, but we forgot to give ourselves collective sovereign rights, like for instance these. In Germany, for instance, we have none of them. In Austria, we have none of them. In Italy, we have one of them, the fifth. I make it short. Just if you want to know it, you can ask me later on. for now, I only want to focus on the first and foremost, only the first one. Why is it important that the highest document, the Constitution, is written by the highest instance? Because the Constitution regulates how much power our representatives in the parliament and the government have. If parliaments and governments write the Constitution, they will give usually all power to themselves and no power to the people. That's our experience, and I can prove it if you need to have it proven. So first, it's essential that we keep some of the power with us. And second, we can define the fundamental guidelines for all policy fields by ourselves. And that's exactly the idea of economic convention or monetary convention or environmental conventions or climate convention or public good and commons conventions. Only the fundamental decisions are taken by the people in a process that lasts 1 year. And the outcome, I make it very short now, is the economic part of the Constitution, the monetary part of the Constitution, the environmental part of the Constitution, and the part on education in the Constitution. And this is the basis for the legislative work of our beloved parliaments. Parliaments would still have the exact same role in democracy as today, just they have to obey already today the Constitution in many countries. But the difference will be that the Constitution will have been written by the people. And if a law contradicts what is in the Constitution, it's immediately stopped by the watchman of the Constitution, which is the Constitutional Court. And if people wrote the Constitution, already said, they would never allow banks that are too big to fail, they would never allow unlimited inequality and other decisions that have been taken by parliaments today. Why I am so sure about that? Because I've played it with 50,000 people all over the world in 25 countries so far. And I propose to play it with you now, that you make the experience how such a constitutional process in the economic policy field could occur in your community in the run of 1 year. And I brought one question, which is seemingly the most impossible question to decide democratically. It's the question of power. It's the question of the concentration of wealth through income inequality, wealth inequality, the size of corporations, and inheritages. And we have surveys from the Financial Times, again, a quite reliable source on this, that people in China consider the present state of inequality as excessive. And people in the United States do as well. And people in Germany do as well. Between 74% and 78% in these three countries, population says the same. So far, if you criticize that, immediately they call you a communist. But the fact that people deem the present state of inequality as excessive does not mean that they're asking for full equality. That's a misunderstanding. They're just asking for limitation of inequality in all these fields. And what I want to vote on with you now is a possible, but you're free, not necessary, limitation of inequality in income. Just to start with one concrete question. And you are now, let's assume that you are the Democratic Assembly in your municipality, just as a fiction, because it's a play here. And we already decided that there is a legal minimum wage that is enough for a decent and sustainable livelihood. We decided it yesterday. This is the legal minimum wage for the full working schedule. And now we can decide the top income, the maximum income. No one is allowed to earn more than so many times the legal minimum wage. If you are against the limitation of inequality, please propose factor and unlimited, no limit. Propose that, no problem. If you are against inequality, then please propose factor 1. The highest possible income is 1 time the lowest, the legal minimum wage. And if you propose a limited inequality, please propose so many times, so many times, or so many times the legal minimum wage as a maximum for the same working schedule. You understood the question? Please make first proposals, and we gather proposals in the first round. And maybe just listen to your heart and don't think it twice. Factor 10, thank you, is the first. Does somebody still need an explanation? Because maybe not everybody understood. Factor 10 times as a maximum the legal minimum wage is the first proposal. Are there more proposals, please? Everybody's happy with factor 10? Yeah, maybe another proposal.
Let's try 20, see how that sits.
How many? 20. Yeah, thank you very much. Second proposal is 20. A third proposal?
I will propose 7 times as much.
7.
Because some 30 years ago there was.
Yeah, may I ask? Okay, may I ask you something? In the real convention, you have a whole year for debate and for arguments, and that's very important because deliberation is a very important precondition for a good decision. This is just a game within a very short speech, so that's why I ask you only to make proposals, and knowing that we will not listen to the arguments. Please. 4 is the fourth proposal. Thank you very much. Is there another proposal? Yes?
Unlimited. And the reason I say that is I have a hard time quantifying.
I didn't hear the reason, but no matter. I heard the proposal. Unlimited. Thank you very much. 5th proposal. Does somebody have another proposal? I heard 4 times, 7 times, 10 times, 20 times, and unlimited. Did I not hear one proposal? Okay, then we can start to vote on all proposals, because this is the first innovation of the procedure that I am bringing in. We vote on all proposals. That's possible. And the procedure is not from us. It's from 2 mathematics of the University of Graz, and you can look it up in the internet after this lecture. The second innovation is we do not measure how much we say yes to a proposal, but we measure our resistance against every proposal. And the winner is the proposal that meets the least resistance. And this has a very deep philosophy behind. The philosophy behind is that it's called systemisch konsensieren in German. The reasoning behind is that every rule that a democratic society or a different society gives itself restricts the liberty of some of the citizens, more or less, and it causes pain in the citizenship. And this procedure allows to figure out intelligently that rule that causes the least pain in the whole citizenship and restricts the liberty in the least possible degree among all people. And you have 3 possible options to show your pain and your resistance. And you're invited to vote on all proposals. First option, you listen to the proposal. That would be the binding rule. You listen to your heart, and you listen to your pain. If there is no pain, there is no energy for resistance. You don't raise an arm. Second option, oh my God, there is some energy for resistance. I raise 1 arm. And third option, it's really burning, hurting a lot. You raise 2 arms. Got it? Okay, please vote all proposals. I will count them quickly, and you can look around yourself when you vote if I'm counting correctly. And you can vote with closed eyes. That's the most efficient way. We go from the lowest to the highest. First proposal, the highest income may be up to 4 times the legal minimum wage in the same working time. Please show your pain with and your resistance against this proposal. resistance against 4 times as a maximum. I start to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 votes of resistance. Second proposal, the highest income may be up to 7 times the legal minimum wage. Please show your pain with and your resistance against factor 7. I start to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Third proposal, highest income may be up to 10 times the legal minimum wage. Please show your pain with and resistance against maximum factor 10. I start to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 4, 6, 8, 30, 30, 32. Second last proposal, maximum income may be up to 20 times the legal minimum wage. Please show your pain with and resistance against factor 20. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 30, 2, 4, 6, 8, 40, 2, 4, 6, 8, 50, 2, 4, 6, 8, 70, 80, 80, 83. Last proposal, there shall be no limit to inequality. Please show your show your resistance. Freedom of speech. Okay, resistance is almost unlimited in this. So, which one is the winner? First, yeah, was by large the least resistance with factor 4. So in this convention, factor 4 would be the winner. Two last questions. Which proposal do you think with 50,000 persons in 25 countries is usually the winner? Usually, in 95% of all plays, factor 10 is the winner. And last question, which is the decision of the parliament in Germany, Austria, or United States, just to name a few? That's the gap between our dear representatives and the sovereign citizens in fundamental questions. And the gap is almost unlimited. And the last minute I want to spend to talk about the movement, because the idea is to build a sovereign democracy. You already want to...
I just want to ask one question about the previous. My understanding is that when they asked people what they thought the current system was, they thought it was much, much less unequal
Yes,
than it really was.
exactly. That's true. There are studies. I found a study from 2 universities from the United States and Thailand, and in this case it was workers. How much would they allow their CEOs to earn as a multiple of them? And the global average is 4.6. Workers would allow their CEOs to earn more than them, but only 5 times more than them. And if you investigate it by countries, there is one exception in the world with an especially high rate of millionaires, where people would tolerate a higher inequality than in other countries. And they would tolerate 20 times. It's an exception. All the others would tolerate less than 10. Do you know which country it is? Singapore. Singapore. But even in Singapore, people only would tolerate 20 times and not this inequality. Okay, last minute for the movement. We started 5 years ago with a dozen of small and medium-sized companies, and until today there are almost 2,000 companies from 45 states that support the movement, and about 300 have made the Common Goal balance sheet, and they show it to the public. And it was our tiny movement that brought a medium-sized company from Germany into the Financial Times, just to show a bit of. This is the first public entity. It's a University of Applied Sciences that made the balance sheet. We have created 19 legal associations since our foundation, and There are some 3,000 volunteers in all these countries that have built so far 150 local groups. You can found a local group anywhere. We do not only work with companies, we also work with political pioneers, which are, amongst others, municipalities. This is a Spanish municipality, and it says municipality for the common good. One municipality asked all its citizens, and 89% of the citizens decided to move and develop towards a municipality for the common good. This is a decision from a regional parliament. The fact that we propose a sovereign democracy does not mean that we do not collaborate with existing representative economic bodies like parliaments or governments. We do, but at the same time we're asking for deepening of democracy. And this is our biggest success so far at the level of the European Union. This is not the parliament, unfortunately, it's the European Economic and Social Committee with 350 members, and they cannot pass laws, that's the problem. But they can ask the European Commission to initiate a law. And they made a 10 pages paper and asked to include the economy for the common good in the law of the European Union, which would include ethical trade, just for instance, and in the legal framework of member states. Now we're trying to repeat the same in the European Parliament, that it becomes law. Our strategy is a bottom-up strategy. Every individual, every company, every municipality, every organization can get involved and co-create this alternative. You're warmly invited to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. We have some time now for some discussion, some questions. I just want to mention, in case anyone leaves, at 3 o'clock there will be a group photo in the room where we were this morning, the sort of semi-round room on the other side. So please, everyone, show up there after this session, okay? So we'll open the floor now for some questions.
Hi, I'm Christine Kaschner. I was just wondering, in terms of the actual implementation and methodology, when I look at your common good balance sheet, who actually decides how much credit points you get for whatever? Because I noticed that there, for instance, there was a sort of a human dignity got more points than ecological sustainability on some level, or how does this work? Who decides how many points you get for what?
Yes. Well, there is a team of, at the moment, 17 responsible redactors. 17 because there are 17 indicators of the common good, and for each indicator there's one responsible person. And we have been developing the methodology over the last 5 years. Now we are, at this very moment, doing the 5.0 version. And this was one line of debate, which we have debated very intensively. And the easiest would have been just to give the equal amount of points to each indicator. That would have been the easiest. Then it would have been, 63.3 periodically points per indicator. And maybe that will be the final decision. So we are in a process of taking decisions, but still the perspective that some of them are more important than others is still the existing rule. And now I remember that we have a very recent debate that you can, by your the auditors can weighten the values, the stakeholders, and the indicators in 4 dimensions. Has a low relevance, some relevance, high relevance, extreme relevance. And it's not the company who's doing that, it's the auditors will do it. Because the auditors have the comparison between companies, between branches, and they can take the whole picture with their experience. So this gives then the auditors the room of maneuver to distribute relevance within the balance sheet. And by the way, The redaction team is open to participation. So, and we're searching for 2 redactors at the moment, I think so. If you are interested and willing to collaborate, it's possible. And feedback, as a matter of course, anyway is possible.
Hello, Teresa Fry from the University of Freiburg. You mentioned the European Union in the end. So I am wondering, your movement or you as a scientist, where do you see the role of an institution such as the European Union for an economy of the common goods? So for instance, also you mentioned the circular economy in the very beginning, and the European Union or the Commission is working on a package, circular economy package. What is your view on this, and what it or can it have an impact or not? Or
Yeah, very important question also. I wrote 2 books on the European Union, and the final lesson learned is that the democratic deficit is so deep that it's better not to make more rules at the European level before democratizing it. And not only the economic policy, also the external trade policy, for instance, is something completely against the spirit of constitution, constitutional values, and citizens. As soon as citizens recognize what is happening here, that trade is turned into an end in itself, they are totally against. And now I don't have the slide, so I have to tell you, but it was one of my most wonderful moments at Vienna University for Business and Administration and Economics. I asked them the same game with free trade, protectionism, and ethical trade. The definition of free trade is trade is an end in itself. The more we trade, the better. Protectionism is clear. Trade is a bad thing. The less trade, the better. Because if you criticize free trade, they immediately say, but are you a protectionist or what? No? And something in between would be trade is a means for an end. And the end, again, is already defined. Sustainable development, human rights, cultural diversity, gender equality, just distribution, and social cohesion and democracy. These are the ends of all economic and social policy. It's in constitutions, it's in international treaties, it's confirmed by citizens if you ask them. And trade is a means. If trade allows more of these ends, I want more trade. But if trade, on the contrary, endangers these ends, then I want less trade. And I want to have all possible instruments to restrict trade. And that is something totally in between, free trade and protectionism. And I thought that even though I could make some point with my medium proposal, the winner will still be free trade. That's what I really, really thought. And there was, in the end, a very high resistance against free trade. There was an even higher resistance, almost absolute resistance against protectionism. And there was zero resistance against ethical trade. And I was deeply moved by this result, because since then I'm sure that if the people could decide on the guideline of what trade is, an instrument or an end in itself, they would do a totally different external trade policy than the European Union is practicing, unfortunately, at the moment. Oh, you have already your private one.
Excellent presentation, by the way.
Thanks.
On a physics point or from a science perspective, because we've become more and more knowledgeable as all these constitutions have been written, shouldn't we be prioritizing nature or natural resources on our present knowledge that we are all made out of them, especially if we imagine, let's imagine that the voters or your people that you're talking to are on a small island that has no trade. Therefore, the supremacy of what they've got, the nature that they have and the resources, should be made known to them and prioritized in terms of their decision making, so they don't become too homocentric and make all of these great social gender judgments and they have no resources. The second question is related to this. and that's education. As Jefferson said, what good is it to make a decision if you don't have the information? Shouldn't, especially let's say on an Ebola or any health and safety issue, and then you could extend it to all issues, shouldn't the decisions be knowledgeable, objectively knowledgeable, or they could be worthless? The humans could be expressing their desires and their opinions, but it's not grounded in reality.
Yes, thank you very much for both questions. First, I simply agree. I use the concept of economic subsidiarity, which means it's absolutely legal and legitimate, and as a consequence, legally correct to give priority to local economic actions, which now would be an infraction against free trade rules. Yeah, now you could sue that region or that country before the tribunal of the World Trade Organization, and if we decide on the TTIP, the unfree trade agreement between the US and the EU, there are more courts and tribunals where the states can sue each other, or even corporations can directly sue states. Economic subsidiarity, the picture for it is the soup shall be cooked locally, and the salt is warmly invited to come from the world market. Now it's in many fields it's the other way around, and especially the main ingredients of the soup shall be raw materials, energy, and also the waste treatment shall be in the region and not abroad. And the second one, the knowledge. Yes, of course. First, this is equally valid for both types of democracy, for direct and for indirect democracy. First, we have today we have an exclusively indirect democracy or representative democracy, and we have the experience that not always our beloved representatives have the information they need to take decisions. For instance, the European Union gave itself a first constitution. It tried to give itself a first constitution, not the first time. In the mid of the 1980s, the European Parliament wrote a constitution of 21 pages, same length as the US Constitution, and voted on it and adopted it with a clear majority. But in the 1980s, the European Parliament was just a fart in the wind. I'm so sorry, and the European Council just put it in a paper basket. So we got no constitution. In the beginning of the new millennium, the idea that European Union is becoming more a state than a federation of states means that it needs a constitution, and they started to elect a convention. But not the bottom-up convention, but the top-down convention. And they put members of parliaments, of governments, and their best friends in the convention. And even though they mistrusted the convention, because the decisions of the convention could be overruled by the presidency of the convention, which was composed exclusively by former ministers and members of executive bodies, which is a clear breaking of the rule of division of power. And just one example, the convention decided that the result of the convention has to be submitted to referendum in all member states, because it's the first constitution of Europe. And the presidency said, no, we don't want to run that risk. We do not decide it by the citizens, by the sovereign citizens, but only by the parliaments. That what the presidents overruled the convention. Then, without having the necessity, the constitutional treaty was voted upon in France and in the Netherlands, because Mr. Chirac at his time thought he would become not the godfather, but the father of the European Constitution, because he asked the citizens, and the citizens said yes to his constitution, but the citizens said no. And all the same in the Netherlands. And then they made out of this the present European Treaty, which is the Lisbon Treaty, and the Lisbon Treaty was only adopted by parliaments. And in Germany, there was the German the BBC of Germany was there and asked the members of the parliament, do you know what you just have voted on? Nobody knew. So there was absolute lack of information what they were voting on. And this is just, I'm now quicker, that's just the argument that, that we have no guarantee that our representatives are well informed when they take decisions. We have some indications that if people make a small number of decisions, they can prepare themselves, but that's the absolute necessary precondition to provide a high quality process of information and deliberation and then vote. And to make it very short, we will not have excellent decisions with sovereign. We will have less bad decisions with direct democracy, and we will have even less bad decisions with sovereign democracy.
Christian, thank you so much. We're going to end here. Excellent lecture, I'll say. We've learned a great deal, and I'm sure you'll have time later today or tomorrow. Are you still here? No. Okay. But
now I'm here.
Okay. Now he's here. We have to finish a tid earlier because of the photo, and there are books from your books are out on the table, right? So this will give you a chance to stop by and look at the books and pick one up if you wish, and then proceed to the group photo. Okay? So thanks again very much for.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I'm
this
still here
session. But we'll have to. And if you allow, I would like to finish this session with a quote from Molière, who said, "All of the ills of mankind, all of the tragic misfortunes that fill the history books, all of the failures and blunders of great leaders have all arisen from a lack of skill in dancing." Molière. Thanks for coming. Don't forget the photo, and the next session is at 3:30.